If you could all put yourselves on mute, it would help as well. Otherwise, we'll have interference as we go along. Also, if you have any questions, please use the question section function, and then one of the team that's supporting the session will get to those questions at the end and put them through. However, if you want to put yourselves on screen and actually ask your question in person, then please do put your hand up, and the team will accommodate that accordingly. So hopefully that's where we're at. So as I said, welcome to this consultation session. I'm just going to give a short sort of introduction around the budget. So Adam, if you could put the slides up, there's a set of slides I just want to quickly run through.
Yeah,
so in terms
those, Joe. Sorry, Joe, just to say, I think a few people might have missed the announcement at the start, just around the fact that we are going to record this meeting so we can share it with people who couldn't attend.
Okay. Right. I'm just waiting for the slides to come up. So just to say, we're at the stage now where the draft budget for 25-26 onwards has now been launched. Actually, was launched on Monday of this week. So you've probably either seen some headlines through the media releases and or through the press, and also the actual reports themselves are already on the council's website. So usually every year we would normally do this briefing the same day as the budget cabinet, but this time the budget cabinet is in advance, so you've got some of that inside information around the detail that's contained in the budget itself. I'll just take you through some of the key headlines though to draw out those things. So if you could move me on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the overall sort of budget development considerations in working from about April time last year, it was now April last year when we started the work on setting the budget for 25-26, which reminds me we'll be starting again fairly shortly for 26-27. So obviously we had sort of continued sort of position around sort of inflation, the economic issues being faced by the country. I've mentioned before the council's always working towards an outcome-based budgeting process, which we're looking to do to continue as well. We've also looking at how we set the budget in line with the new corporate plan that's around now, and also the joint administration priorities that have been set. Over a number of years as well, I have been looking with the cabinet, relevant cabinets, at amending what I term the structural budget deficit. So effectively, there's some areas of correction within the budget over a number of years that we need to work through, either from additional demand or cost pressures that are happening, just to make sure that we're getting the budgets in a better position, ready for the forthcoming financial year. So we've continued that, and quite extensively, you'll see in a minute, in terms of what we've done for 25-26. Obviously, the key thing is about stability in the medium to longer term. So we're continuing to work in that direction around that. So we're looking at some of the things like a transformation program, is looking at how we will work as an organisation over the next couple of years and how we will deliver services to residents and businesses over that medium term. We will continue to do the work we're doing at the moment around working on our medium-term financial strategy and sustainability strategy. So 25-26 is a continuum of what we've been doing over a few years now. So if we go to the next slide, please. Pause. So what's changed recently? Obviously, in terms of setting the budget, looking at all the things around inflation, again, how that's been impacting on sort of council sort of budgets, and how that's impacted across the whole of the local government sector for a period of time now. We did, as usual, receive our provisional settlement 18th of December. I think the government keeps promising it will be early December. I'm not sure I've ever seen an early December settlement for many, many years, but one day I'm sure we'll get there. But 18th of December, we received our provisional settlement. it was on the back of, I don't remember if any of you are aware, but the Chancellor also announced that she had sort of like an autumn fiscal statement, finance policy statement that issued a number of key things that were going to happen in local government and across the public sector. The provisional settlement built on that, but also introduced some more funding for social care and a new recovery grant, what they've termed now. We still would need the final settlement. That will arrive in early February in time for when we set the final budget. We have, and if many of you have been keeping abreast of what's been happening throughout the year 24-25 in terms of our sort of overall budget monitoring position of the council, we are still getting significant cost pressures in children's and adults. Children's is still the key area of concern for the council in terms of the spending position there. Adults seems to be coming under control, but obviously we've still got a long way to go in making sure we're getting both of those areas going in the right direction, because at the end of the day, they account for something like 65 to 70% of our overall spend of the council. So it's quite important that we're getting on top of those. So in terms of where we're at, one of the reports that was published on Monday was the period 8 report. So i.e. our budget monitoring position to the end of November, that should be 24, not 23. And that was showing a projected overspend by the end of this financial year of around £4.7 million. Interestingly, and I refer to children's, so within that 4.7 million, 6.3 million there's a projected overspend in children. So if we took the sort of vanilla position of no overspend at all in children's, we would actually be 1.6 million underspend as a council. So you can see the impact what children's is having in terms of the overall council budget. Overall, the proposals lead to a net investment budget for 25-26 to try and meet those sort of ongoing demand and cost pressures, the impact of inflation, and obviously all our statutory requirements we need to meet. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So in terms of the key budget proposals, hopefully you've probably already seen this from various press releases, etc. But the council tax increase 4.99%. The government assumes you will increase at the referendum limit as part of their funding that they provide for us. That includes 2% specifically for adult social care, which is spent on adult social care. Overall, that means at the Band D level, which is how all local authorities are compared in terms of their council tax increase, that's a £1.64 increase at the Band D level. But quite important for Southend is approximately 70% of our properties are in the lower bands, A, B and C. So they'll obviously have lower weekly increases. Still waiting on where we are with police and fire, because that will get added to the final council tax position. And Leigh Town Council, they've currently proposed their increase at 2.9%. Again, the budget has been balanced with no use of any general fund reserves, but we will, as statutorily required, use our collection fund surplus of around 1.4 million to set the budget. So as I said, we have got a balanced and robust budget for 25-26 in my opinion, and works towards sort of our transformation journey for the medium term. We bring all of our revenue and capital together. We've been doing that for a few years now. I think it works really well. So it's all one package of investment in one report now. We used to have, going back about 3 years, I think it was, we used to have separate reports, but I think it's much better. They're aligned. You can see the connections between the revenue and capital side of things. So we move to the next slide. You can see the high level position around the investments and savings. So talked about investments and unavoidable cost pressures that we're facing as a council. There's a whole plethora of things here, dealing with a number of obviously new major contracts the council's facing and entering into 25-26. There's quite significant sums of money going into both children's and adult services. So for example, adult services is somewhere in the region of about nearly £6 million there going extra into that particular service. and for children's somewhere around about another £5 million going into that area as well. So if you go on to all of this detail is set out with narrative within the reports that are on the website. So next slide, please. So some further investments and unavoidable cost pressures. I'm not sure why that bit's not coming up, but oh, there it is. So there were some other items of around just over £7 million. These are more the corporate areas of the council which we need to budget for. So, for example, the top one is obviously the potential pay award that will impact the council coming up. And some of the things that I was talking about in terms of how we're correcting the budget, there were some on the other slides, but one of this one is income budget right sizing. So got a number of income budgets across services, fees and charges where the demand isn't there, or there's various changes in the way things are happening, so we need to get those budgets right rather than having sort of gaps as we move through into 25-26. But overall, you can see from the previous slide and this slide, somewhere in the region of £25 million of investment into the council's budget. So that's quite a significant sum of money that's going into that budget. And of that £25 million, there's about £9 million of what I've referred to as correcting the structural budget deficit of the council. So that will help get us into a much better position for the start of 25-26. On the flip side, part of balancing the budget, we've got a range of savings. Lowest level of savings, I think, ever in certainly my 14 years here I've been at the council. So it's £3.6 million worth of savings across a range of areas there in terms of mainly around staffing, efficiency and productivity, and sort of more sort of income generation, and particularly around investment income, the way interest rates are sitting at the moment. So about £3.6 million worth of savings that will need to be delivered across 25-26. There's also, you can see the little note at the bottom there about £1.7 million worth of savings that were agreed last year that roll into 25-26 as well. But overall, net budget growth of around £21.5 million for 25-26. So if you go to the next slide, please. So that was on those bits about revenue. Some other bits about revenue, how those savings and investments have impacted. Overall, there's about 21 FTE posts that will be deleted from the council's establishment list. 8 of those are from those particular savings that I referred to there, which is only around about 0.4% of the council's overall staffing. And in addition to that, we ran a second year of voluntary redundancy. So 13 FTEs have been formally agreed out of 60 people that applied. So 21 posts coming out of the establishment. As part of the investment, there's about 7 posts being created into the budget, and 4 of those actually are around sort of the commissioning brokerage team within children's to try and help support some of the negotiations, contract negotiations, etc. we need to do in that area to try and reduce the overall cost of residential placements. Schools budgets, small little changes, so there will be small increases for schools. Fees and charges, generally, most are up by around 2.75%. There are some exceptions to that. Car parking overall, even though there's some ups and downs, overall the sort of yield for that area of income has come down around 2.4%. And then other sort of changes as well. Bereavement services, generally, they're all much lower, all the charges there. Others that have increased above sort of 2.75% are listed at the bottom in that last line there. All of these again were detailed out in a report that went to Cabinet on the 19th of December, again on the council's website. Go to the next page, please. On the other side, capital. So this is, a capital investment into our sort of strategic infrastructure, new assets, etc., those types of things. So you can see on the left-hand side, new schemes being added to the main programme, i.e. to be delivered from 25-26 onwards. So this covers this £40 million going in is across about 3 or 4 years worth of investment. But you can see about half of that is around the highways infrastructure project for Better Queensway, so kick-starting that and actually doing the highway scheme for starting in 25-26. There's an additional £4 million extra for footways and carriageway improvements, so that's doubling the amount that's already in the current budget for 25-26. And then another big item there is around £12 million going into housing revenue account, which looks after all of the council's sheltered housing unit stock and also general needs stock. So there's some investment in that to maintain the decent home standards. There's also a range of other areas on the right-hand side, which will come into the main programme at the appropriate time once we've gone through the various business cases and ensuring that they all stack up and moving there. So some things around some important stuff like Southend Pier, continuing the work we do for the pier, coastal defence refurbishment programme, and obviously some other stuff which is sort of our just maintenance of our basic infrastructure assets to maintain those. Next slide, please. So just overall, just to say, partly setting the budget, I'm not assuming any borrowing for 25-26, but depending on if interest rates take a remarkable downturn during 25-26, which I doubt they will. But if they do, and if the conditions become favourable, I may borrow, but I think it's highly unlikely in 25-26, probably not even in 26-27, but we see where we'll get to. Overall, I said there was some housing revenue accounts, so that was some of the monies that were going in. So you can see the different areas for the housing revenue account for our council housing stock. But in total, the current new programme, capital investment programme, covering the years 25-26 through to 29-30, is now around about £160 million. So some quite significant investment into the overall assets of the council and new assets as well. Mainly funded 60 million from external funding, only 48 million from borrowing, and you can see some other smaller areas that are making up the funding total for that 160 million pound. So next slide, please. We're nearly there, I promise. You can look at the bottom left-hand corner. It's 10 out of 14 now. So medium-term financial plan. We need to look obviously to what's happening next. So for through to 29-30, looking at our projections for 26-27, i.e. the budget gap for next year and the next 3 years after that. You can see those laid out there, but overall, probably somewhere in the region of another £32.5 million. The caveat to that is obviously, I'm not sure if you're aware, but government have announced major changes to local government funding reform that will happen during 25-26. Plus also there'll be a massive comprehensive spending review. So the intention being that will set sort of a multi-year funding settlement for government, which is long awaited and overdue. So that'd be really good if we get to that position. So we should have our sort of 3 years sort of funding position from 26-27 onwards, gives much more certainty to financial planning and how we do things as a council. So that's really sort of important to it. But, you know, just on the flip side, that funding reform may or not, may be good news or bad news for the council, but we'll have to wait and see as part of the development of that, because at the end of the day, there will be as one pot across the whole country. It's how that's going to get moved up and down and around the country, depending on various factors, e.g. things like deprivation or council tax levels, that type of thing. So that's all being worked through various technical groups over this next year to build up to announcing the settlement for 26-27. So still a long way to go, £32.5 million, but still compared to a lot of authorities, probably this is a really good position to be in. I'm suspecting some of the London Borough figures I see, it's something like they have to find something like about 80-90 million pound per year to balance their budgets. So we're looking at 32.5 million across 4 years. So if you go on the next page, please. Housing revenue account, I've mentioned this is our sort of general needs and sheltered housing stock. Overall, rents are going up 2.7%. Obviously 70% I think of those people are roughly on housing or various benefits, so they will see the number of people won't see any changes or limited changes. Garage rents going up by 2.75% in line with the other sort of increase in fees and charges for those who are tenants. For non-tenants, though, the proposed increase is 20% for those from April. Service charges and heating charges both being decreased in line with the expected cost recovery around those two particular areas. So that's good news for sort of those housing tenants. Next slide, please. So in terms of the key messages, then we're looking to deliver against the council's new corporate plan priorities and to deal with those demand pressures in key services like children's and adults. Also waste and homelessness, because I think we're now seeing a bit of a spike in homelessness at the moment. Working towards that outcome focused organisation, that the budget is balanced for 25-26, and we do have a clear longer term view for moving forward over the medium term. And overall, I would still say that the council is still in a relatively strong and resilient financial position, which is something I can say, which maybe a lot of authorities can't say at this point in time, but I certainly can. So on the next page, please. So just some flagging some key risks. I've mentioned some of these things already, but obviously the funding review from the government and how the comprehensive spending review will work its way through. We need to still maintain doing proper VFM decisions around major contracts. We do need to get control of children's and adult spending. As I said, that's quite a significant proportion of our council spend. And need to keep an eye on spikes in other services. So I've just mentioned like homelessness, and we're starting seeing some additional costs coming in that particular area. We will do all what we can internally about making sure that the cost base is right and ensuring that services are being delivered value for money terms, and that efficiency and productivity is the height of what service managers do in the council. Just keep a close eye on inflation. It's starting to sort of spike a slight bit. We'll see where that gets to. But we just need to as well to make sure that where we have got income budgets, because around 40 million of our overall budget is reliant upon income that comes in from various sources. So we just need to make sure that we're keeping on top and delivering that as a council, and that we do deliver upon the transformation programme that's set out within the budget report, because that's really important for the medium term. Last slide, please. I think, yeah, it's definitely the last slide, I think. So we're there now. So you can, if you haven't got your questions already, you can start typing them in. I'm sure Adam will start sifting those through and seeing what we've got. So the budget timetable, the next steps. So as I said, the budget was actually launched on Monday, 6th of January. We are where we are today at the business and voluntary sector consultation. The actual draft budget itself will be considered by Cabinet next Monday, the 13th of January. We will then go into a round of Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee, so consideration by members of the draft budget package. That's on the 30th of January. Throughout January, I will be delivering various opposition and administration briefings around the budget to support them and for them to ask questions around what's within the overall budget itself, to help the member debate when we get to that for scrutiny committee, but also leading up to any changes for the final budget that will go to Cabinet on the 11th of February, and then the final budget being agreed and the council tax being agreed at council on the 20th of February. So that's where I am. The slides will be circulated, so you will see a copy of the slides. They'll come round to you. So if you want to take the slides down now, Adam, and then I don't know whether you've had any questions at all, or whether that was everyone completely understood.
Well, I can't speak for everyone.
I'm sure
we haven't had
because we've
any
got the
questions submitted,
leader
although
and Councillor Collins online to answer any questions as well, unless it's technical. I'm sure Daniel will have a go as well.
so I've got a question submitted in the Q&A. I'll just publish now, but in the meantime, I've got a couple of hands up. So let me just allow the mic to Tricia. Okay, Tricia, you should be able to unmute.
Hello, yeah, is that okay?
Yeah,
can you
hear
hear me?
you.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, obviously, when there are any cuts or transformation measures in children's and adult social care, quite often the impact of that falls upon the voluntary sector in terms of filling gaps and picking up the needs. I just wondered if there was any increase in investment or any changes in the way you might fund the voluntary sector and schools who will be picking up those gaps. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to just kick off on that one? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, feel free, Joe.
Yes, fine. Thank you, Dan. Yeah. So in terms of, I think you sort of mentioned around investment, I think you're specifically talking about voluntary sector. In terms of the approach there, in terms of both adults and children's, there is quite significant investment going into the overall sort of service budgets, where quite clearly those executive directors and teams will be working with the voluntary sector about how they deliver some of their services. So there's nothing specific as added in for additional for voluntary sector, but as part of obviously all the overall costs that are going into children's and adults, there will be quite a connection between the council and those services in terms of how things will move forward. So I suppose one of the things that is coming down the line, the government have promised it in the autumn statement, was the Household Support Fund. They didn't announce that as part of the provisional settlement, but we are expecting to hear something probably about March time or something like that for 25-26. So that's essential funding that's run through the council's Essential Living Fund team that will support a number of residents across the city. And the team themselves work quite directly with a lot of the voluntary sector around that. So there are some specific allocations to voluntary sector that way, but we don't yet know the figures for that. What we do know, assuming the word is kept around the Household Support Fund coming in for 25-26, there will be some additional funding for that area to support it with that sort of area of work. Daniel, did you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Joe. I think it's just worth adding that there's no cuts to budgets within those services. There's net investment into budgets in those services. I think what might be being reported out there is about some of the focus that we have on cost reduction. Cost reduction, the way we're looking at it, is not about cutting money out of the service. It's about ensuring that if we look at children's, for example, a significant amount of what we spend in children's services go into the profits of private companies, and it's about ensuring that we have the right focus on reducing that spend so that we have the right placement for children, that they're well matched, and that we're getting the best placement for the child, but also the best value for the local taxpayer, so that we can free up some of that funding to then reinvest within the service. So it's not about reducing budgets, it's about reducing profits and price gouging of private companies. That's the cost reduction focus.
Can I add one other comment, Joe? Daniel?
Yeah, please do, Paul.
Yeah, we're very conscious of the national insurance contributions, and we're putting money into our budgets for our social care for our suppliers, be they voluntary, be they businesses, to make sure we meet their demands for increased cost after April.
Right, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone there. We
Thanks,
have
Paul.
a few written questions which I'll go through in order of how we receive them. So one from Murray Foster. Hi, morning Murray. He's asked, under your business transformation program, what position is being taken about the continued occupation of the civic centre?
So I'm happy to take that one, and if you have anything to add, Joe.
Yeah.
So I think there's been across a few different administrations views to whether we should move or stay in the civic centre. The previous administration decided that we would stay in the civic centre. The last joint administration that we were part of, had initially looked into potentially moving into the Victoria shopping centre. As a new administration, we took a view that we didn't want to put staff or the city through flip-flopping between different positions. So we've decided to continue with that decision to stay in the civic centre, and we're rationalising our suite further across the civic estate. So we're not looking to move from the civic centre at this point.
Thank you, Daniel. Next question is from Mark Flick. Good morning, Mark. Have we considered a scheme for older people and winter fuel in light of the central government's withdrawal?
Yeah, I can take that one again. We already did that with our household support fund, where we ring-fenced a significant amount of money to support those who are in additional need of help around winter fuel. And once we get notice of what the new HFS settlement will be in March, as Joe has suggested, then we'll seek to do the same.
Thank you, Daniel. Question here from Kim Hall. Why are the council spending £100,000 on a feasibility study? And I'm assuming that relates to the cliff stabilisation and Never Never Land project.
Sure. So the reason we're spending that money is because we have to continually look at protecting our cliffs from slippage and destabilisation. That particular area already is closed off to the public because of various issues with the footpaths and the structures and the stability there. So the money is being spent on ensuring that we can do the right work in, the right engineering work in order to ensure that we know what the current position is with that cliff, and then what investment we may need to make, as we have done in other cliffs across the city, for example Belton Way, which has just undergone a significant restabilization process. So that's what that feasibility study is for. It's part of general work that we would have to do anyway.
Thanks, Daniel. A question here from Sophie Cooper. Good morning, Sophie. Sophie has asked, will mental health services be included in the budget, and will there be any further grant funding to help people better their mental health?
Don't know if you want to take the grant funding side of things, Joe.
Yeah, I think in terms of the actual sort of announcement from government provisional financial settlement, there wasn't anything specific, if I recollect, in terms of specifically for mental health grant. There are a number of grants around the social care spectrum that would, dependent upon the criteria against their usage, which we will still need to find out. There may well be some space to free up some of that as part of the investments that we're putting in to the adults arena sort of thing. So that's backed by a number of those grants, but I don't believe within that investments there's anything specifically been added in for mental health, but we didn't get any additional specific funding for mental health.
Thank you, Joe. Question here from Anne Marie. Good morning. SOS Rape Crisis provided specialist child rape and sexual abuse support services to children and young people in Southend. Is there any scope to discuss funding, as they are not funded by the council, and they're keen to ensure these vital services continue to be provided in our local community?
Well, I mean, we're here to talk about the budget that we've set, so it'd be very difficult to talk here in the room about anything that we may or may not be able to do, because we've already proposed the budget, but more than happy, Anne-Marie, for you to contact us and have a separate offline discussion to see what way we could help, or certainly even advocate with our MPs to unlock some more funding somewhere down the line.
Thank you, Daniel. Question here from Councillor James Moyes. Good morning, James. He said, sorry if I've missed this, but how much has been built into the budget to cope with increases in supplier costs due to the national insurance rise and minimum wage increase?
Yeah, that was thanks for your question, James. That was in the budget proposals in the slides that Joe shared around. There is the adult social care provider inflationary uplift of £3.5 million, and Paul also mentioned that the money that we're putting in around coping with additional ENI and minimum wage increases. So it is something that we factored into the budget. I'm sure you'll pick us up on that in P&R.
Thank you, Daniel. So I'm just getting to the next question. Question here from Kay Mitchell. Good morning, Kay. What is the investment in early intervention, as high costs for children and adults for a greater level of need can be reduced by effective early intervention services? So question there about early intervention services.
Sure. Well, I think that's it's covered within the overall children's services budget, but we do have additional funding going in around pressures around placements and residential. Part of the dealing with the pressures around placements in residential will be also ensuring that there's proper targeted action and investment in early intervention. So that will be contained within the existing budget, as well as within the additional funding that's going in as part of the overall service provision.
Thank you. Another question here from Kim Hall. Sorry, not another question. First question. Hi, Kim. Would you be able to identify what investment you're putting into the community safety team, and what is the please explain what the 40 million external funding, or where is the 40 million pound of external funding coming from? Do we have any leased assets, and what is the impact to the funding?
Sure. So we already invested in year into the community safety team with the expansion with an additional 3 community safety officers. At the moment, our head of community safety feels that we were at the right level of staffing. If opportunities arise or there is a need for us to expand that, we will always look at that. We've committed to ensuring that there is adequate support within the community safety unit to support all of our communities, not just around the high street, which was the point of the initial expansion in year. In terms of the additional 40 million, I'm sure Joe will be able to explain it better, but this is internal funding. But Joe, I don't know if you want to give the more technical answer to that, but it is no additional borrowing.
Yeah, is that, I'm trying to think where that 40 million.
That's the additional capital program investments.
Oh, the capital program investment. Yeah, so sorry. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so that 40 million pound is new investment into the main program for 25, 26 onwards. A number of that will come from various sources, including borrowing and external funding. So of that 40 million pound, 20 million of that specifically was for the highways infrastructure scheme, and actually 3/4 of that 20 million pound, around 15 million pound, is coming from the highways infrastructure funding, so that's external funding. But all of that 40 million pound has relevant funding associated with it, but there is limited amounts attached to borrowing, but the borrowing will only be undertaken later on as we move through after the spend in those particular areas.
Thank you, Joe. I've got a couple more. Question from Andrea Cunningham. Hi, Andrea. Can you say more about the impact of devolution? So potentially quite a long answer. I guess
Yeah, well,
topic of great interest, but I think I'll hand over to you, Daniel, for that one.
Thanks, Adam. I'll try and keep it short. I think in terms of the setting of this budget, devolution is probably not a question that we can answer. More than happy to have a conversation about devolution offline, but also I know Murray's on the call. Murray has invited me in, I believe it's early March, to come along to the Southend Business Partnership to have a discussion and Q&A about devolution. And for those who can make it there, I'll be more than happy to have that conversation at the Southend Business Partnership, or for you to contact me directly, and we'll take it up. But I think in terms of the budget, they're quite separate at this time, so not really something that we could probably answer to the fullness that you would probably require.
Thanks, Daniel. We have had another one around devolution from Zenelia, asking us to clarify if devolution will be stopped if new information comes to light later, suggesting it's not in the best interest of Southend residents. But I suspect the sort of same applies to your previous answer, really, Daniel.
Yeah, but I think I could probably slightly expand on that one, just on the basis that the government stood on a platform that included commitment to English devolution, 100% of the country to have devolved powers, and they're one of the biggest mandates the country has seen in the last century or so. So on that basis, I think unless government changes their mind, devolution is a train that we can't get off of at this point.
Thanks, Daniel. Another question from Murray. The upcoming government spending review with hopefully 3-year settlements for councils, but no doubt this will cross over with devolution, the possibility of creation of three unitaries in Essex with one for South Essex. I think, sorry, I should have read to the end of that question. It's more of a comment than anything else, but yeah. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Daniel. Sorry, I should have read to the end of the question before I read that out, but not sure there's anything to add to that, really. But
no, nothing to add, I'm afraid, Adam.
No, brilliant. I think we have two more. Another one from Zenelia. The draft budget mentions about new full-time employees. This might be something we can clarify afterwards, but and special council assistants and new full-time employees, and refers to Appendix 6. Couldn't find anything any mention of these. Could you please clarify on that point?
Yep, I can do that, Adam. So I think the reference about special council assistance is probably more from an Echo article. In terms of the additional posts that are being created, there's an additional post in counter fraud, which is being created, an additional post that will be to protect the public purse, an additional post in legal to support us with the costs of placements, an additional post in the energy team to focus on an energy efficiency and cost savings, and then there'll be 4 additional posts which will be created in children's services, which is the new brokerage team. So going back to the answer to the first question that we had around cost reductions in children's services, the brokerage team's focus will be to ensure that we're getting the best deal, and that when you are buying identical or similar packages of care from one day to the next, that there aren't the huge fluctuations that we have seen in previous years, that we're getting consistent and predictable levels of service and cost efficiencies within that. So that's the role of the brokerage team, and those are the 7 posts that are being created. None of those are council assistants.
Thank you, Daniel. Final question that I've had so far from Nick Singer. Good morning all. Good morning, Nick. I see there was a slight budget for events across the city. How many events do we think are due to take place with this budget set to support local businesses? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Nick. So that 100,000 is specifically in addition to the existing budgets that are there, but not all events are contained within that. For example, the funding for City Jam sits within the funding around civic pride. So that 100,000 will go towards other things, such as the partnerships that we've had around fireworks for the fireworks season, as well as New Year's Eve. There's also additional separate funding that will go into City Day. So that 100,000 will be across various different events, including things like the Halloween parade, etc. But the budget's there. We have good relationships between the events team, the cultural team, a new director of culture and tourism, and the business side. And I'm very confident that over the next year, or within this upcoming budget year, that we'll be delivering lots of really interesting events that will support businesses. And well, we both saw how packed it was on the seafront on New Year's Eve, and we want to keep replicating that kind of stuff, which also links in with our reduced parking fees along the seafront as well, which we hope will also be a benefit to you.
Thanks, Daniel. I did notice we had to readmit Nick as you were answering that question, so I don't know whether he caught all of it, but we'll obviously share the recording afterwards as soon as we can. I don't have any more submitted questions in the Q&A, so I'll kind of hand back over to you, Joe, or unless anyone's got a question they want to ask over the mic. Otherwise, yeah, there's no further questions in the Q&A.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for coordinating that for us. No, thank you very much for everyone coming along this morning. Hopefully you found it helpful. As I said, the slides will get circulated to yourselves and other people who weren't available today, but also the recording, so that everyone should be able to pick up the detail there. Any further questions, obviously come back through the economic development team where you got the invite from, and we'll pick up any questions from that and get responses back to yourself. But once again, thank you very much, and then we'll move forward to the budget cabinet next Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone
Cheers.
for coming along.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Dan.
your questions.
Thanks. Thank you.